Hello, my name's Roisin and I'm sick of reading. I love historical fiction. It is my favourite genre to read. I love being immersed in a completely different world. I love learning about things that I didn't necessarily know. I love the almost world-building element of it because even though it is real, it is a world that I haven't experienced, and I love the way that writers make me feel like I am immersed in that time period. I enjoy the way that writers can talk about our own time period whilst using a historical period. So, since I talk about historical fiction all of the time on my channel, I thought I would give you my 10 favourite historical fiction novels, with one caveat. I recently did a video on this channel where I reviewed the Thomas Cromwell Trilogy by Hilary Mantel. They are probably my favourite historical fiction books of all time, but because I have talked about them so much recently, I have left them off this list. I will leave a link to where I review the whole series in the cards above. So, without further ado, let's get into my top 10 favourite historical fiction novels of all time. These are not in any order of favouritism, they're just in the order that they came into my head. So number 1 is the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. This is a novel set in the Congo in the 1960s. It is about an evangelical missionary and his wife and 4 daughters who go to the Congo in order to try and convert people, and they go to live in this village and they know nothing about the Congo or the Congolese people, but they are trying to convert them. It covers 3 decades in their lives during the Congolese fight for independence from the Belgians. And the story is told from the perspective of the 4 daughters. Each chapter is from a different daughter's perspective, and you cycle through them. There is the beautiful eldest daughter who just wants to marry and go to church and live in the south and have nice dresses. There are the twins, one of whom has a physical deformity and doesn't speak. Her perspective is a lot more experimental in the way that it's written. And then there is also the youngest, who is a baby, and who is a toddler, and so her perspective is very much simplified. They bring with them everything they think they will need in Congo, but they know absolutely nothing. They bring seeds, but their seeds will not grow. Despite there being an abundance of edible plants all around them, they won't eat them because they don't know anything about them. And it is what I love most about this novel is how beautifully it is written. It is so immersive and thrilling. It is really a novel full of suspense. From when they arrive in 1959 through the War of Independence and how the tragedy of this family unfolds and the way they get scattered. There are scenes that are so intensely beautifully written. One of the most vivid that I remember is a scene in which the fire ants come overnight and all of the villagers know that this is going to happen, and they've been trying to warn them but they won't listen, and they wake up and there are just ants everywhere, like they're on a sea of ants, and they have to run to the river to get in, and it is so viscerally beautiful. I felt like there were ants crawling all over my body. It was really gross, but in a really, really good way. It's definitely a slow-paced, slow-moving novel, but still so much manages to happen, and I learned so much about the Congolese fight for independence and what happened after they were independent from Belgium. And it is a beautiful exploration of colonial attitudes and also post-colonial attitudes about Africa. A first child is your own best foot forward, and how you do cheer those little feet as they strike out. You examine every turn of flesh for precocity and crow it to the world. But the last one, the baby who trails her scent like a flag of surrender through your life when there will be no more coming after. Oh, that's love by a different name. Number 2 on my list is the book that I always say is my favourite novel of all time, and that is The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. This novel is set at the end of the Second World War in a villa in Italy, where one Canadian nurse stays to tend for one patient who they know nothing about, but they call the English patient because he has an English accent. He's been completely burned from head to toe. At the beginning of the novel, a thief turns up who the nurse knows from Canada, and there is also a sapper who is sleeping in the back garden trying to defuse a bomb, and he's a Sikh man from India. The English patient, we go back in time through his memories to what he was doing before he ended up burnt to a crisp in an Indian villa, and how he got there, and an affair that he had in the past, and then also it's about secrets and uncovering secrets, because all of the people who are in this house have secrets. It is about the ravages of war, and it is about race and racism, and it is so incredibly poetically beautifully written. I had to read the first chapter like 3 times the first time I read it because it was just so incredibly beautiful. It's a sort of novel with not a lot of dialogue, but it is just so poetic and lyrical. I wish I had something with me to read you a quote from it. We die containing a richness of lovers and tribes, tastes we have swallowed, bodies we have plunged into and swum up as if rivers of wisdom, characters we have climbed into as trees, fears we have hidden in as if caves. I wish for all this to be marked on my body when I am dead. It is one of the most hauntingly beautiful novels I have ever read. Number 3 is the Regeneration Trilogy by Pat Buck. This is a trilogy of novels set during and after the First World War. The first one takes place in a psychiatric hospital where Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen are recovering from their PTSD, and there is a psychiatrist and a patient, both of whom are made-up characters. Obviously, Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon are famous poets from the First World War, but it is about how they are treating what they call shell shock and the relationships of these characters, all 4 of whom are gay men. It is really incredibly beautiful, the way that it talks about mental health and what war does to people, how it tears people apart. What is so incredible is that even though these people are real, a lot of them, Barker manages to take you inside their minds and you understand their feelings and the fear and the tension that comes from this war novel, and also from having to hide who they are in this time. In the second and third novels, we move beyond Craig Lockhart, the mental hospital in which these patients are staying, and we follow them further on in their time, although not Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon for obvious reasons. Sometimes in the trenches you get the sense of something ancient. One trench we held, it had skulls in the side, embedded like mushrooms. It's actually easier to believe they were men from Marlborough's army than to think they'd been alive a year ago. It was as if all the other wars had distilled themselves into this war, and that made it something you almost can't challenge. It's like a very deep voice saying, "Run along, little man, be glad you've survived." Number 4 is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. This is another chunky epic of a book. Most of these books are really long, which I love because I love the way that immerses you into a historical world. The Luminaries is about the New Zealand gold rush, which was a time period I knew absolutely nothing about. This man, Walter Moody, turns up in Hokitika and walks into this room in this hotel hoping to get a drink, only to find 12 men completely turn silent when he walks through the door, and he doesn't know what has happened. And the novel is written for the first half as these men telling the story of what has happened before he arrived, and then the second half is what happens after that. Each of these 12 men represents a sign of the zodiac, and all of the other characters are like the moon and the sun, and their personalities are like the zodiac signs. If you know nothing about the zodiac, it doesn't matter at all. The way that Catton differentiates between all of the voices of these 12 different men who keep interrupting each other and overlapping their storytelling is incredible. It is truly impeccable. I recommend listening to the audiobook if you can. The guy who narrates it, excellent job. He makes them all sound entirely different. But it is, at its heart, a mystery novel. A wealthy man has disappeared. A prostitute has tried to end her life, and an almost fortune has turned up in the home of a luckless drunk. And it is about how this happened and about how this was all set up and then what happens afterwards. It is amazing, and how well Catton invokes the world of shipping and the 19th century gold rush boom and bust. The world feels really real and visceral and dirty, and I absolutely adore it. For although a man is judged by his actions, by what he has said and done, a man judges himself by what he is willing to do, by what he might have said or might have done. A judgment that is necessarily hampered not only by the scope and limits of his imagination, but by the ever-changing measure of his doubt and self-esteem. Number 5 on my list is The Mermaid and Mrs Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower. This novel is so much fun. It is set in the 18th century in London, where a man, Mr Hancock, he is a merchant, and the captain of his ship comes back with a mermaid. It is not a real mermaid, it is a curiosity, it is dead, and he sets it up for display for people to come and pay him to see the mermaid. And one of the people who comes to see him is Angelica, the courtesan. She is down on her luck because her former sugar daddy her former patron has died and left her with no money, and her former brothel madam wants her back. And it is so incredibly beautiful. The way that it is written is so visceral. There are people who piss in a bowl and throw it out of the carriage window. It is disgusting, and it is also beautiful. A little raunchy, a little bit raunchy, but I love the way it is described. You can feel the silk and the sweat and and the smells and the cobblestones, everything feels incredibly real and visceral. Again, I would recommend the audiobook because it is narrated by Juliet Stevenson, and she just has so much fun with the narrative. She definitely makes you feel even more immersed than you already do. It is also a little bit fantastical towards the end, and it deals with topics of class and race and sex work, and it is incredibly well done. Angelica knows about women and their empire building. She knows also that a woman in perfect control of her fate never resorts to rudeness, and this gives her a small glow of satisfaction. She clasps Mrs. Lippard's hands and smiles her most honeyed of smiles. Number 6 on my list is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. This is another beautiful, slightly mysterious novel, and this time set in the Victorian era. It begins with a woman whose abusive husband has just died, and so she decides to leave London and go to Essex. She is a big fan of Mary Anning and a believer in fossils, but because in the Victorian era fossils seemed so magical and unbelievable, unreal, that they didn't know what could be real and what couldn't. And there is a rumour in Essex of a great serpent who is terrorising the coast. So Clara goes with her son, who is coded to be autistic, though of course that is not a word that they would use in those times, and her maidservant, who is in love with her, and they go to the Essex coast. She has been proposed to by a doctor who is kind of weird and wants to perform open heart surgery, and that she ends up on the Essex coast and meets a vicar and his wife who is dying of tuberculosis. And she has this strange relationship with both of them where she loves both of them and the way they interact. It is a novel that is about science versus faith and about group hysteria and folklore and what can happen in a small community if an idea takes hold. It is incredibly beautifully written. It made me want to go to Essex more than anything has ever made me want to go to Essex. The description of the fenlands, which in the UK are these like really flat wetlands that are mostly Cambridgeshire, Norfolk and Suffolk, but used to extend into Essex. And it's this really flat, wet coastline that is mostly not considered to be very beautiful, but the Essex Serpent made it seem incredibly beautiful to me. And Clara is one of my favourite characters ever. I love her spunk and her feistiness and her going about the countryside in men's clothes. Sometimes I think I sold my soul so that I can live as I must. Oh, I don't mean without morals or conscience. I only mean with freedom to think the thoughts that come, to send them where I want them to go, not to let them run along tracks someone else set, leading only this way or that. It deals with ideas of gender and class as well, and there is a moment in a slum in London which is really well done. Next on my list is the only one that would probably not be considered literary fiction, but I love nonetheless, and that is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I really didn't know that the Channel Islands were occupied during the Second World War, and that is what this novel is about. It is an epistolary novel told in letters between our main character and the people who live on Guernsey, and then when she arrives in Guernsey, the people that she knows in London. She is a writer who is famous for a collection of novels that are about an old man during the Second World War with a stiff upper lip and a fighting split spirit, but she hates them and she wants to write real fiction. The first book that she published was a autobiography of Anne Bronte, and she loves that much more than she loves the work that she's writing at the moment. And she goes to Guernsey in order to write a story about literature during the war and how it helped people. That is the story that she is contracted to write by the Times. And she ends up meeting this whole community who set up a book club during the Second World War, during the occupation, in order to protect themselves about what happened. It is and there is a romance involved as well. It is an incredibly pretty, beautiful Sunday afternoon kind of cozy novel, but it also still manages to deal with these incredibly harsh, hard, traumatic things that happened during the occupation of the Channel Islands, and when they brought Jewish slaves over to do their building, when the Germans brought Jewish slaves over to do their building for them, that doesn't feel too difficult to read, but at the same time it really does approach it and handle it, and it's very lightly and skillfully done. And I love Dorsey, who is the main guy. Love him. That's what I love about reading. One tiny thing will interest you in a book, and that tiny thing will lead you to another book, and another bit there will lead you to a third book. It's geometrically progressive, all with no end in sight, and for no other reason than sheer enjoyment. Number 8 on my list is probably the most weird and literary, so if that's not your jam, I would skip this one, but if you love novels that are experimental and strange, I would definitely give this one a go. It is an incredible novel, and that is Lincoln in the Bardo. It won the Booker Prize a couple of years ago. I mean, I think The English Patient also won the Booker Prize, Some of these other ones might have been nominated as well. Lincoln in the Bardo is about the day when Abraham Lincoln's son died, and he goes to the Bardo. So the Bardo is this Tibetan Buddhist idea about what happens after you die. So he gets taken to this cemetery, and then he ends up rising in the cemetery and talking to all these other people who are also in the cemetery. There are two different types of chapter here, I would say. One is in the real world, and it's told through historical sources. So it'll be a chapter, it'll be a section from a letter or from a diary, and then it will say who that was by and the date of it and who they were. And some of those are real, actual historical sources, because obviously the Lincolns were famous and these people were writing letters and diaries that were preserved, and some of them are made up in order to give a fuller picture of what was happening at the party at which he died, and also a fuller picture of who Lincoln was as a man. The other type is more standard prose, but it is inside the Bardo, and it is told from different perspectives of different ghosts, basically, who Lincoln's son meets there in the Bardo. And it is so weird, but I absolutely love it. If you want a portrait of 19th century American history from the perspective of a very famous person, but in this totally human way, I think it is a really good one. And also, because it has all these different people in it, people who are not just Lincoln's son, but all of these other people who have died, you get such a big picture, such an idea from multiple different people. There is a section of people who are in an unmarked grave because they are slaves, and then there are loads of different other people, and also it's sort of a meditation on what happens after you die, and all of these people who are suffering with the difficulty of being dead, and then people who go on, and someone who claims to have gone on and come back, and the story that he tells of what that was like. So it is a tale that is incredibly broad historically, but is also incredibly human, dealing with Abraham Lincoln's loss and the suffering that all these different people have gone through in that time period. It is a testament to fiction's ability to speak honestly and powerfully about things that really mattered to us. And it has a panorama of voices. It explores from so many different perspectives. I would definitely also recommend the audiobook for this, because it has a full cast, including people like Nick Offerman and George Saunders himself. Only then, nearly out of the door, so to speak, did I realise how unspeakably beautiful all of this was, how precisely engineered for our pleasure, and saw that I was on the brink of squandering a wondrous gift, the gift of being allowed, every day, to wander this vast sensual paradise, this grand marketplace lovingly stocked with every sublime thing. Number 9 on my list is Atonement by Ian McEwan. This novel is stunningly beautiful, and the way that it is told is so clever. It is about a grand country house in the 1930s, and these two people who have an attraction to one another, and a child who sees something she doesn't really understand, and also a terrible vile act that is committed at the same time, and how those two things become conflated, and the punishment that happens to the person. And it goes from this beautiful country house in the 1930s into the Second World War, and the battlefields in France, and trying to escape on D-Day, and also to London and to the Blitz and what that was like. And it is about, and to a nurse in the Second World War, and it is incredibly beautiful and incredibly well done. It is a novel about lies, and about malice, and about the effects that this can have on people for their whole lives. What happens to Robbie happens because of what this lie that Bryony told about him, and it is her fault, and the way that she tries to forgive herself, because she is the main perspective through which a lot of the novel is told. And it follows Bryony as a child, as an old lady, and how she has dealt with these things, how she has held on to these things, ideas of grief and guilt and forgiveness. And the way that it is written, there is a reveal at the end that is tragic. It is so incredibly moving and beautiful and tragic, and so well done, that it means that the next time you read the novel, it is even sadder, because you know what is going to happen. Was everyone else really as alive as she was? If the answer was yes, then the world, the social world, was unbearably complicated, with 2 billion voices, and everyone's thoughts striving in equal importance, and everyone's claim on life as intense, and everyone thinking they were unique when no one was. One could drown in irrelevance. And finally, number 10 is another Booker Prize winner, and that is A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. This is set in Jamaica in the 1960s and 70s, and it also goes to New York and Florida during that time. It is about the singer, and an attempted assassination on the singer, who he's always named as the singer, but we know he's Bob Marley, and about the concert that he held. But it is mostly about the gangs in Jamaica, and the way that colonialism, racism and poverty have led to these gangs, the treatment of women in Jamaica, and about drug running, and how drug running is influenced. It is a brutal novel. It says a brief history of 7 killings, but I tell you, there are far more than 7 killings in this book. There is a lot of violence, rape, assault, murder. It is a bloody, gory, it is a serious, intense novel, and if you don't want to read things like that, I would definitely skip this one. But if those things don't bother you, it is worth reading. It's another story, it's another book that tells stories from multiple different perspectives, and we see so many different people telling this story and about these lives. It's about the general election in Jamaica and the way that things were rigged by the rich against the people, and the way that the CIA has dirty wars affected people from Latin America into the Caribbean. In the 1970s to the crack wars in the 80s, New York, to a radically altered Jamaica in the 1990s. It's an epic novel. It spans so much time and so many people. There are so many characters, but it is so well done, so you get so attached to all these people. It is written a lot of the time in patois, which can take a minute to get into if that's not something with which you are familiar, but it definitely adds to the atmosphere of the novel. But in another city, another valley, another ghetto, another slum, another favela, another township, another intifada, another war, another birth, somebody is singing redemption song. As if the singer wrote it for no reason but for this sufferer to sing, shout, whisper, weep, bawl and scream right here, right now. So that is all 10 of my favourite historical novels that I have read. I know that there are loads more historical novels that I need to read and that my list could be ever changing. Let me know what your favourite historical fiction novel is in the comments down below. I would love to get some more recommendations, and let me know what your favourite genre is, because I am going to try and branch out in the future. That's a little sneak peek of my plans for the future. I hope you found a recommendation for a book to read, and if you read any of these books, please let me know what you thought of them. I would love to talk to you about them in the future. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know, and please subscribe because I will be back the day after tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.